This is a follow-up to the sermon from Sunday. The sermon was from Stephen's speech in the book of Acts just before he was stoned. And Stephen, as we saw last week, was arrested and taken to trial because he was accused of blaspheming the law in the temple. Well, they said he was speaking against the law in the temple. And it's very likely that the things that Stephen was saying were things that Jesus had said about the law and about the temple. And now Stephen's in trial. Stephen now makes his defense. He's hauled before the court. He's going to make his defense. Well, what is Stephen going to say? He did not deny the accusations. He didn't do that at all. Rather, he pointed out that it was those people who were accusing him, it was they that were committing the true blasphemy by thinking that God could be contained in Jerusalem at the temple, and that God was small in essence. He turns the whole thing around to say that they have the wrong perspective. To commit blasphemy is to speak in a profane manner about the sacred, and they were saying that he was doing this about the temple and about the law. And Stephen's defense is that he did not speak blasphemy. It was they who spoke blasphemy because they believed God to be small. His argument gets right to this repeatedly. He believed and proclaimed God's glory and majesty and omnipresence, that God is everywhere present. God was not limited to the temple. He was not limited to the one space. I wonder a little bit if him being a Hellenist didn't have something to do with this, him being a Greek-speaking Jew rather than him being a Hebrew in the same way that some of these other folks are. But whatever the case may be, he understood some things that maybe they had forgotten. God was with Abraham without a temple. He says this in his speech, that before the temple was created, God was with Abraham. God was with Moses before there was a temple. God was there even when God planned for there to be a place for him to be worshipped. It was in the traveling tabernacle. And then when you see later, David saying that a temple needs to be made for God, God seems rather disinterested in the whole thing. And he quotes what God said about it in there, that would God really dwell in a house made by man? So you have this understanding that that they missed something that Stephen is picking up on, that Stephen is understanding. Even Solomon, when he prayed about the temple, and when the temple was made, Solomon's temple, the glorious temple there made, all the stuff to make it was brought in by David, and then Solomon ordered it to be made. Even Solomon proclaimed that God did not dwell in houses made by human hands. And Stephen quotes this in Acts 7:48. God is not like us. God is not like us. And don't try to shrink him as these people did. They had shrunken God to be something almost man-like. And that's not who he is. We worship God who is big. He is everywhere present. He owns everything. Is there ever a time, no matter where you go in this earth, that you leave God's presence? No. When your life is, when you are over in another part of the country or another part of the world, does that mean that you're not supposed to worship God and not supposed to worship him? No, that's not what they mean. Look at Psalm 139, verses 7 to 12. It really gets to this point. Where shall I go from your spirit, or where shall I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, and the light about me not be night, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is bright as the day, for the darkness is as light with you. God is not like us. God is big. Church is special. Going to church is special, and you must go. If you are a Christian, you are commanded to go. And there's something special that happens there as we worship the Lord together, as believers, and God has commanded for us to do so. But there is never a place in this world in which we leave apart outside of God's presence. He is everywhere present. God is spirit. He does not have a body like man. He is not like us. So we don't just worship at church. We don't just worship at church. We don't just declare God's glory at church. Worship happens here, there, and everywhere. Our entire lives are to be an act of worship to the Lord. So don't try to shrink God into a being that exists within this one particular location, in this one particular place. He is everywhere to be worshiped and obeyed always. Stephen picked up on this. Stephen understood this, and it seems that those that drug him into court did not.